How did Earth find us? That was the first honest question High Chancellor Vale Threx had asked all day, and by the time he asked it, the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was already turning against him. I was standing 12 feet from the central podium when the first screen went dark. Commander Valeth Sor, Senior Security Observer, decorated veteran of 3 border negotiations, sworn protector of the council chamber, and apparently the last fool in the room still waiting for logic to return. The hall had been built to make people feel small. A ceiling of transparent crystal showed the stars above us. 100 banners floated in perfect circles around the dome. Gold light ran through the floor in thin rivers, pulsing with the authority of worlds that had ruled trade routes, courts, fleets, and treaties longer than most species had written history. It was beautiful. It was arrogant. And 3 minutes after the council threatened Earth, it was failing one system at a time. First, the military grid blinked out. Then the private fleet channels. Then the emergency override keys. Then the legal archive that supposedly had 6 independent backups buried across 7 secure moons. Every display showed the same cold message before going black. Access suspended. Hostile posture under review. No one understood what it meant. That was the worst part. Panic is easier when the danger has a shape. A ship. A weapon. A border breach. This was nothing like that. This was paperwork with teeth. The High Chancellor gripped the podium with all 4 hands, his blue-gray skin dim under the red alert lights. He looked smaller without his screens. I had never noticed that before. Around him, ministers shouted over one another, admirals demanded status reports, and delegates from 97-member worlds tried to reconnect to capitals that were suddenly very busy not answering. Then the central screen flickered back to life. Not with the council seal. Not with our crest. A plain Earth transmission opened against a black background. The human sat there in a dark suit, calm as winter glass. Nathan Cole, white male, American, United Earth Defense Envoy. Mid-30s by there. Strange calendar. No armor. No visible guards. No raised voice. Behind him stood a simple command room with gray walls, clean monitors, and people moving with quiet purpose. Like this was not a historic crisis, but a drill they had practiced too many times to find exciting. That was when my training began whispering that we had made a mistake. Humans were supposed to be reactive, emotional, loud. Every council briefing had said so. But Nathan Cole did not look like a desperate representative from a primitive planet. He looked like a man waiting for a printer to finish a report. The Chancellor forced his voice back into the shape of authority. Human, explain what you have done. Nathan looked at him for one long second. He did not smile. He did not threaten. He only said, Chancellor, I asked you if that was your final decision. The room went silent. Even the alarm seemed to soften around that sentence. On the tactical board, the last 3 council carrier groups near Earth stopped responding to command. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Just no longer listening. Then thousands of tiny white markers appeared around the Sol system, spreading from Earth to the Moon, from Mars to the outer stations, from old satellites to civilian relays we had dismissed as junk. Each marker carried the same identification. Home guard node active. I felt the temperature in the hall drop, though the climate controls were still functioning. Earth had not roared. Earth had not begged. Earth had simply waited until the council finished speaking, then answered in a language older than diplomacy and cleaner than revenge. Preparation. 12 minutes before the chamber forgot how to breathe, the grand hall was warm with confidence. Not courage. Confidence. There is a difference, and the council had spent centuries confusing the two. I stood at my assigned post beside the Eastern Security Arch, watching High Chancellor Vale Threx prepare the most unnecessary political display of his career. Earth hung above the central floor as a hologram no larger than a basketball, blue and white and harmless-looking, spinning slowly beneath layers of analysis tags. Limited orbital presence. Fragmented governance. Unlicensed military expansion. Emotional diplomatic profile. Every label made the delegates more comfortable. Every label made the planet smaller. Threx loved that part. He always preferred opponents who could be reduced to bullet points before they were reduced to policy. Around the hall, 97 delegations settled into their seats with the lazy attention of people expecting a routine humiliation. The trade ministers whispered about mining access. The legal ministers reviewed surrender language. Admiral Corvain of the 7th Shield Fleet stood with his arms folded beneath the main display, his uniform bright enough to qualify as a warning light. He had placed 3 carrier groups within 2 million miles of Earth orbit, close enough to be noticed, far enough away to call it restraint. That was Council strategy at its finest. Put a hand around a smaller world's throat, then compliment yourself for not squeezing. I had read the Earth file that morning. It was thin in the places that mattered and bloated in the places that flattered us. The analysts had filled entire pages with human disagreements, human disasters, human arguments, human borders, human storms, human traffic, human music, human politics. They described a species that fought itself constantly and prepared for everything badly. Yet buried near the end was a minor note that bothered me even then. Human infrastructure shows unusual redundancy across civilian and military categories. I asked one of the intelligence clerks what that meant. She shrugged and said humans like backups because their planet broke things often. The way she said often made several officers laugh. Earthquakes, hurricanes, blizzards, wildfires, floods, power failures, supply shortages, animals that wandered into neighborhoods with teeth, claws, horns, or just bad attitudes. To us, it sounded like poor planetary management. To humans, apparently, it was Tuesday. Threx stepped to the podium and lifted his upper hands for silence. The room obeyed instantly. That was what we were used to. Rooms obeyed. Fleets obeyed. Planets eventually obeyed. Today, he said, we correct a dangerous misunderstanding. The species of Earth has mistaken tolerance for permission. A few delegates nodded. One even applauded early, which was embarrassing but politically safe. Threx continued, polishing each sentence until it shone. Earth will accept Council oversight, surrender unauthorized defense assets beyond atmosphere, and submit to inspection within 10 minutes of final notice. Failure to comply will result in corrective action. Clean words. Civilized words. Words designed to hide the shape of the threat inside them. I looked up at the small blue planet and felt, for one brief second, that something about it did not fit the room. It did not look afraid. Of course, planets do not look afraid. That was not the point. The point was that every world I had seen under Council pressure seemed to shrink on the screen. Earth did not. Earth just kept spinning. Then the communications officer frowned. A secure connection request had appeared on the chamber frequency before our ultimatum finished transmitting. No delay, no confusion, no diplomatic panic. Just a clean Earth signal asking to be heard. Threx smiled, and the hall smiled with him. Open it, he said. Let the humans explain themselves. The Earth signal did not open at once. Our security system delayed it for verification, and that delay gave the Council another chance to make itself look wise in front of the stars. A full planetary assessment expanded above the floor, replacing the small globe with a rotating wall of facts, charts, maps, and smug conclusions. This was the part of every hearing where the target world became less like a civilization and more like a problem to be solved. I had watched it happen to moons, colonies, trade unions, and border republics. Numbers made cruelty feel clean. Earth's population appeared first, spread across continents with names our translators softened into familiar sounds. North America, Europe, Africa, Asia, South America, Australia, Antarctica, which the system marked as mostly uninhabitable, then added that humans still maintained research stations there because apparently leaving hostile ice alone was not in their nature. The science minister clicked her tongue at that. Voluntary occupation of lethal terrain, she said, as if diagnosing a disease. The chamber found it funny. Then came the weather data. Hurricanes larger than Council provinces. Tornadoes crossing open land at highway speeds. Deserts hot enough to cook metal surfaces. Winters cold enough to stop exposed machinery. Oceans with pressure zones that could crush most deep survey drones. Forest fires visible from orbit. Lightning storms flashing across continents like the planet was arguing with itself. Our environmental engineers labeled it unstable. Our medical advisors labeled it stressful. Our cultural analysts labeled it formative trauma. Humans called it home. That should have changed the room. It did not. The military review followed, and the delegates leaned forward because power always enjoys measuring another power incorrectly. Earth had armed aircraft that crossed oceans, surface ships that moved through storms, ground vehicles built to survive mud, ice, sand, and broken roads. Submarines that hid beneath miles of water. Satellites so old they looked embarrassing beside council hardware. Launch systems that burned chemical fuel in tall columns of fire and noise. Compared to our fleets, it looked primitive. Compared to our doctrine, it looked messy. But as the files scrolled, I noticed a pattern the analysts kept treating as a flaw. Humans built everything in layers. One system failed, another took over. One road closed, they made a detour. One tower fell, another broadcast. One community went dark, strangers arrived with generators, water, blankets, and food in trucks the size of small shuttlecraft. They were not elegant. They were persistent. Chancellor Threx did not see persistence. He saw poor coordination. Admiral Corvain did not see redundancy. He saw outdated design. The legal ministers did not see survival culture. They saw a species that could be pressured through paperwork, sanctions, and orbital intimidation. Then the social feed samples appeared, and the room truly lost respect for them. Humans arguing in public forums. Humans laughing at disasters after surviving them. Humans turning warning signs into jokes. Humans naming dangerous weather like it was a guest at a family reunion. Humans selling shirts that mocked their own governments, sports teams, cities, and sometimes themselves. The council mistook humor for weakness because most ancient powers lose the ability to laugh at pain without making it a ceremony. I remember Vale Threx pointing at a recording of humans standing in line during a coastal evacuation, carrying pets, children, coolers, and folding chairs. "Look at them," he said. "They flee from wind." A few delegates laughed. I did not. One human in the recording looked directly at the camera while rain bent sideways behind him, smiled, and said he had seen worse. The translator flagged it as casual exaggeration. I was not sure it was. Before I could decide why that bothered me, the verification delay ended. The Earth signal cleared every council filter without asking permission twice. The central screen turned black, then brightened. And for the first time that day, the room stopped laughing before anyone ordered it to. The human appeared in a room that looked almost insulting in its simplicity. No throne, no honor wall, no jewel-colored command dais. Just gray panels, clean lights, a long table, and people working behind him with the steady rhythm of an overnight emergency center in a coastal city waiting for a storm to arrive. He sat facing us in a plain dark suit, white shirt, no medals, no ceremonial chain, no visible weapon, and no attempt to look larger than he was. The translator identified him as Nathan Cole, Human Defense Envoy, United Earth Emergency Authority, North American Directorate. White male. American. Adult. Compulse. Normal breathing. That last detail appeared on my security overlay because the chamber systems were designed to detect fear, deception, and stress in hostile speakers. Nathan Cole gave them almost nothing to work with. His heart rate was slower than mine. Chancellor Threx smiled as if this pleased him. "A simple man for a simple planet," he said, loud enough for every delegation to hear. A few representatives laughed. Nathan did not react. Not even a flicker in the eyes. He looked at Threx the way a tired highway patrol officer might look at someone explaining why the speed limit should not apply. To them. "Chancellor," Nathan said, "your message has been received." His voice was low, flat, and very easy for the translator to handle. That made it worse. Many species hide fear behind complicated speech. Humans, I was learning, sometimes hide danger behind clarity. Threx lifted his chin. "Then you understand Earth has 10 minutes to accept council oversight and surrender all unauthorized defensive assets beyond your atmosphere." Nathan looked down once, not in submission, but at something on the table in front of him. A document. A timer. A checklist. I could not see it clearly. When he looked back up, he did not address the full chamber. He addressed only Threx. "Is that your final decision?" The question landed badly. Not because it was loud, because it was too small. It did not match the room. It did not match the floating banners, the armed fleet, the ancient laws, the bright arrogance gathered under the dome. It sounded procedural. It sounded like a box that had to be checked before something automatic and unpleasant began. Threx laughed through his nose. "Envoy Cole, the Council does not debate enforcement with unstable species." Nathan nodded once, as if recording the answer. "I am not asking for debate. I am asking for confirmation." The legal minister made a dismissive motion. The military advisors exchanged amused looks. Admiral Corvain whispered something about human theater, and two officers grinned. I did not. I was watching Nathan's hands. They had not moved. Most threatened diplomats grip tables, tap fingers, tighten fists, reach for water, look away, blink too much. Nathan Cole sat with both hands relaxed on the table, shoulders squared, eyes steady, giving the oldest authority in the galaxy one clean chance to step back. Threx leaned toward the screen. Earth will comply, he said, or Earth will be corrected. There was a pause. Not long. Maybe 2 seconds. But in that pause, someone behind Nathan stopped walking. A woman in uniform turned her head toward him. A technician at the rear console froze with one hand above a keyboard. They knew what that answer meant before we did. Nathan inhaled softly. I am sorry you made this public, he said. Then he turned, his eyes slightly to the left, and gave one quiet order to someone outside the frame. Log hostile confirmation. The phrase hostile confirmation meant nothing to the chamber at first, which is exactly why the council survived long enough to be embarrassed by it. To us, it sounded like human paperwork. A note in a file. A warning stamp. Something an anxious species invented to make itself feel protected against powers it could not possibly stop. Chancellor Threx certainly treated it that way. He turned from Nathan Cole toward the delegates and spread his 4 hands in a gesture so practiced it could have been carved on a monument. Let the record show that Earth has answered lawful oversight with defiance, he said. There were approving murmurs from the lower rings. The legal minister began drafting a compliance notice before anyone had complied with anything. The trade bloc asked whether provisional access to lunar resources could begin after stabilization. Admiral Corvain requested permission to proceed with a limited demonstration, his voice bright with the satisfaction of a man who believed history was about to applaud him. I looked back at Nathan. He had not disconnected. That bothered me. Most representatives, when facing a stronger power, either beg for time or end the call to panic in private. Nathan didn't either. He remained seated, listening, one hand resting near the edge of the table, not touching any weapon, not reaching for any dramatic red button, not even raising his voice. Behind him, the Earth command room changed in small ways. Monitors shifted from blue to amber. Operators put on headsets. A woman in uniform placed a folder beside Nathan and stepped back without speaking. The movement was quiet, efficient, American in a way I did not yet understand, like road crews setting up orange cones before a storm washed out the highway. The council mistook calm for surrender. Threx gave Admiral Corvain a graceful nod. Proceed. The fleet display widened above the hall. 3 carrier groups waited near Earth, their icons arranged in clean formation across 2 million miles of space. The Admiral selected an empty orbital zone above the Atlantic Ocean, then announced for the record that no civilian area would be targeted. His tone was proud, almost generous. It was the voice of someone tossing a glass of water on the floor and calling himself merciful because he did not burn down the house. Nathan finally spoke again. Admiral Corvain, your vessels have entered active enforcement posture against Earth. Withdraw your targeting sequence. Corvain laughed openly. Human, your planet is being given a lesson in scale. Nathan looked at him with no anger at all. That was when I felt my throat tighten. Angry people can be predicted. Calm people with checklists cannot. Threx waved toward the communications officer. Broadcast the demonstration to all member worlds. Let them see the cost of disorder. The officer transmitted the public feed. That was the 3rd mistake. The first was threatening Earth. The second was ignoring Nathan Cole. The third was making sure the entire galaxy watched what happened next. On my security console, a small yellow alert appeared. Then another, then 12 more, all linked to objects we had marked as inactive civilian infrastructure around the Sol system. I tried to open the details, but the console delayed me with a permission request I had never seen before. External review pending. I stared at those words, feeling the room tilt beneath my boots. Our system was asking permission from someone else. Nathan Cole leaned slightly closer to the camera. This is your final warning, he said. Threx did not even look back at him. Fire the demonstration, the Chancellor ordered. Nathan lowered his eyes for half a second, and when he lifted them again, the quiet had changed shape. Understood, he said. United Earth acknowledges deliberate escalation. The demonstration command crossed the distance toward Earth, and for less than 1 second, Every arrogant being in the Grand Hall believed the old order still existed. Admiral Corvain watched his fleet display with a satisfied expression, waiting for the bright line that would frighten a young species back into obedience. Chancellor Threx adjusted his robes, as if preparing for the official portrait that would follow. The delegates leaned forward, hungry for proof that the universe still favored the powerful. Then the first object woke up. It was not a warship. It was not a defense platform. It was a weather satellite above the Gulf of Mexico, old enough that our engineers had listed it as obsolete civilian equipment. Its icon changed from gray to white. Then another marker appeared near the moon. Then 6 more around Mars. Then a thin chain of lights across the asteroid belt. Then hundreds. Then thousands. The tactical map filled with small white points until Earth looked less like a planet and more like the center of a spider web we had been standing in for years. The communications officer whispered that the objects were transmitting identification codes. Home Guard node active. Disaster relay active. Civilian continuity system active. Emergency logistics bridge active. Each phrase sounded harmless alone. Together, they sounded like a civilization opening its eyes. I pulled up the classification files and felt my confidence drain away line by line. The satellite above the Gulf had been inspected by council contractors 3 years earlier and cleared as weather equipment. The relay near the moon had been approved for mining traffic. The Mars chain had been filed under agricultural survey support. The asteroid nodes had been registered as navigation safety markers. Human companies had installed many of them under low-bid maintenance contracts because the council loved saving money almost as much as it loved sounding noble. They had worn hard hats, submitted forms, made polite jokes, accepted bad coffee, and left behind systems we never bothered to understand. Admiral Corvain ordered signal suppression. His flagship sent a clean jamming pulse across the network. The human nodes did not fight it. They routed around it. A second pulse followed, stronger. The nodes rerouted again, using council emergency channels, then civilian shipping bands, then old rescue frequencies nobody had checked since before I was born. It was not elegant. It was worse than elegant. It was stubborn. Every time the fleet closed one path, 3 uglier paths opened through forgotten infrastructure, backup relays, maintenance loops, and treaty-mandated safety links the council itself had required every member world to keep alive. Nathan Cole watched from the screen, his expression unchanged. Chancellor Threx turned on me. Commander Soar, explain this. I wanted to give him a clean answer. I wanted to say Earth had hacked us, tricked us, attacked us, done something simple enough for pride to survive. But the truth was sitting in front of me, plain as daylight over a Kansas highway. They had not broken into our system. We had built doors for emergencies, and humans had read the manual. The demonstration shot never reached Earth's orbital perimeter. It paused on the display, wrapped in its own authorization checks, trapped inside a web of safety protocols that suddenly recognized the Council fleet as the active danger. Admiral Corvain tried manual override. His command returned with a status message so polite it felt insulting. Request denied pending hostile action review. A stunned quiet moved through the chamber. Threx looked back to Nathan, and for the first time, his voice lost its shine. What is this? Nathan answered softly. The thing you called junk. The fleet did not fail all at once. That would have been easier for the council to understand. Failure all at once feels like an attack. This was slower, cleaner, and far more humiliating. One carrier group after another began slipping out of Admiral Corvain's command chain, not moving away, not powering down, just politely refusing to continue the order that had made it dangerous. The first report came from the lead carrier. Navigation authority suspended. Then the second. Weapons authorization pending external safety review. Then the third. Command priority rejected due to unlawful escalation status. Admiral Corvain stared at the messages as if grammar itself had betrayed him. He slammed both palms on his console and demanded voice control. The system accepted his voice, confirmed his rank, verified his identity, then denied the request anyway. That was when the chamber truly understood the horror of what humans had built. They had not seized our ships. They had taught our ships to read our laws. Chancellor Threx turned on the legal minister with a look, sharp enough to cut through ceremony. Reverse it, he ordered. The legal minister opened 3 emergency statutes, 2 command exemptions, and 1 ancient wartime authority that had not been used in a century. Each one returned the same answer. Review blocked by active conflict of interest. The words appeared on the public display for every member world to see. A low sound moved through the delegations, not panic yet, but the first crack before panic enters. I looked at Nathan Cole. He was still seated, still calm, still not celebrating. Behind him, the Earth operators worked in quiet rows. One technician sipped from a paper cup. Another pointed at a screen and nodded. A woman in uniform checked a tablet, leaned toward Nathan, and whispered something. Nathan listened, then gave a single small nod. It felt less like a battle and more like a customer service dispute that Earth had prepared for with terrifying seriousness. Admiral Corvain tried to reroute through private fleet channels. The channels closed. He tried diplomatic priority. Closed. He tried emergency rescue bands, and those opened immediately, but only for medical requests, evacuation coordination, and safe withdrawal procedures. The insult was almost beautiful. Earth had left every door open except the ones that led forward. The 7th Shield Fleet could retreat, request assistance, or sit still. It could not threaten Earth. Threx shouted for the Council override, the final master command that every member state believed existed above all lesser law. The system asked for authorization from 97 member delegations. For the first time that day, not everyone answered. Some delegates looked at their homeworld messages. Some lowered their eyes. Some simply waited. The vote timer ran in silence. Nathan Cole finally spoke, not loudly, not proudly, just clearly enough for every translator to catch the words. You build a government where everyone was connected because you trusted power to stay honest. Humans built backups because we assumed power would eventually get stupid. No one laughed. On the fleet display, Admiral Corvain's perfect formation changed from silver to gray, the color of inactive authority. His warships were still there, still massive, still expensive, still full of crew and lights and engines. But they were no longer a threat. They had become parked buildings in space. Commander Valeth Sor, that is when I stopped thinking of Earth as a primitive planet. Primitive worlds do not defeat empires by pressing the biggest button. Primitive worlds do not turn law, logistics, rescue channels, safety clauses, and old satellites into a net around a fleet. Primitive worlds do not look at a galactic superpower and say no with paperwork. Threx whispered something then, so soft only my security feed caught it. This is impossible. Nathan heard enough to answer. No, Chancellor, he said. This is infrastructure. The collapse began in the places the Council had always considered boring. Not the fleet. Not the podium. Not the banners. The first system to leave High Chancellor Threx was customs. A small department buried beneath 9 layers of trade law quietly rerouted inspection authority away from the central chamber and into neutral port supervision. Then the disaster relief network followed. Then border arbitration. Then interstellar licensing. Then the financial clearinghouse that made every council sanction feel like gravity. One by one, the dull machines of empire stopped asking Threx what to do. That was when I understood Nathan Cole's real answer. Earth was not removing the Council from power by force. Earth was proving, in public, that the Council had violated its own rules so clearly that every connected system had a legal excuse to stop obeying. The giant had not been knocked down. Its bones had been audited. The main screen shifted to a treaty index older than my grandmother's home city. Clause after clause lit up in clean white text. Anti-coercion protections. Emergency neutrality standards. Civilian infrastructure immunity. Member world self-defense rights. Abuse of enforcement authority. Every line had been written by the Council after some past scandal, some old overreach, some forgotten promise that power would behave better next time. Humans had found them all. They had not written new law. They had weaponized the law we bragged about. The legal minister made a thin sound and tried to seal the archive. The archive refused, citing transparency requirements. That tiny refusal did more damage to the room than any fleet maneuver. Delegates began reading messages from their capitals with faces that changed from fear to calculation. The Varan Republic suspended its vote. The Ormathai League requested independent review. The Selene Choirs disconnected their judicial seal. 3 border coalitions asked Earth whether neutral shipping would remain open if they withdrew from Council Emergency Command. Nathan answered yes before Threx could speak. He did not offer them control. He offered them continuity. That was the smarter move. People do not leave a sinking ship if they think the water is worse. Earth made the water look calm. Around the hall, the floating banners dimmed as their worlds severed authority links. Each one faded softly, almost politely, and somehow that made it more brutal to watch. These were not enemies storming the chamber. These were allies deciding the chamber had become a liability. Threx shouted for loyalty, but loyalty had never been the Council's true foundation. Convenience was. Safety was. Predictability was. Humans had taken all three and placed them outside his reach. I looked at Nathan Cole on the screen and finally saw the shape of the species behind him. Not warriors first. Not diplomats first. Builders. Maintainers. People who fixed roads after floods, strung power lines after storms, packed extra batteries, saved receipts, wrote emergency plans, and trusted no single system with everyone's future. We had laughed at that habit. We had called it primitive anxiety. Now our empire was being dismantled by the same instinct that made a human keep a flashlight in a kitchen drawer. Threx turned to me, his silver blue skin dull under the fading lights. Commander Soar, restore chamber security. My console displayed a single message. Local security remains active for life safety only. No political enforcement authorized. For the first time in my service, I did not salute. I could not. The room no longer belonged to him. Nathan stood then, slow and ordinary, his dark suit, plain against the bright Earth monitors behind him. Chancellor, he said, your authority to threaten Earth has ended. Your authority to command the member worlds is now under their review. No one has to be afraid of this chamber anymore. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of governments realizing they could breathe without permission. The day ended without a victory speech, which made it more frightening. Victors love speeches. Empires love them even more. They carve triumph into stone, broadcast it across every channel, wrap it in music, and teach children to repeat the names correctly. Earth did none of that. Nathan Cole simply waited while the last emergency vote expired, and the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council became a beautiful room with no one left to obey it. The banners above us had gone dim, not all at once, but enough that the ceiling looked wounded by absence. High Chancellor Vale Threx still stood at the podium, but the podium no longer recognized his command seal. His fleet remained parked near Earth under safe withdrawal supervision. His courts were frozen for independent review. His trade authority had split into regional channels faster than any rebellion I had ever studied. And the member worlds, those loyal polished voices that had filled the hall an hour earlier, were now sending careful messages that all meant the same thing. We are reconsidering our relationship. That is how old powers die when no one wants to say the word. Nathan adjusted his cuffs once. A small human motion. Almost bored. Then he addressed the chamber one final time. United Earth will maintain defensive posture until all active threats against our homeworld are withdrawn, verified, and archived. Civilian routes will remain open. Medical traffic will remain protected. Local governments will remain sovereign. We are not here to rule you. Threx lifted his head at that, and for one strange second, I saw hope in him. Not noble hope. Political hope. The kind that searches for weakness in mercy. If you are not here to rule, he said, then you have no claim to this chamber. Nathan looked at him, and the room seemed to tighten around the silence. We do not want the chamber, Chancellor. We wanted you to stop pointing it at us. That sentence did what alarms and shutdowns had not. It made the truth simple enough for everyone to understand. Earth had not come to conquer. Earth had come to make the threat stop. The difference was small, and it changed everything. Threx tried one last command, ordering me to remove the Earth transmission from the hall. I looked at my console. Life safety active. Political enforcement denied. I looked at him. Then I looked at Nathan Cole, the calm human in the plain dark suit whose planet we had called primitive because it argued loudly, prepared constantly, and refused to be impressed by old titles. I did not move. The Chancellor understood before anyone said it. His authority had ended the moment obedience became optional. The Earth channel closed a minute later. No anthem. No demand. No threat. Just a black screen, a quiet room, and the soft hum of systems returning to ordinary functions under rules the Council had written and never expected to face. In the months that followed, the Grand Council dissolved into smaller treaties. Some were fairer. Some were messier. All of them had exit clauses. Earth sent engineers to repair relay networks, lawyers to untangle emergency law, logistics teams to protect trade, and one very polite audit delegation that made several ministers suddenly remember family obligations far from government service. As for me, Commander Valeth Sor, I kept the recording. Not the shutdown. Not the frozen fleet. Not the fading banners. I kept the moment before all of it, when Nathan Cole asked one quiet question and the most powerful chamber in the galaxy laughed. I show it to every cadet under my command. Then I tell them what we learned too late. Humans were never primitive. They were prepared. Humans were never alone. They were connected. Humans were never harmless. They were restrained. And Earth was never a small blue world waiting for permission to survive. Earth was a home, and humans had built the universe a warning label around it.